Alright, today I am going to teach you the difference of easy versus hard. Within the Rlaarlo Facebook group, a number of people have mentioned how difficult it is on certain vehicles to access the center diff. Definitely brought up a number of times with the XTS F10, and since the XTS F10 and S10 are both based on the Rlaarlo Omni Terminator platform, as is the SBK10, so I figured I'm going to use my SBK10 as a show vehicle. This obviously does apply to all of these vehicles, whether you have the Omni Terminator, the F10, the S10, or the SBK10. So let's get into it. Aloha, and welcome back to 9000 RC. So, as I said, today I'm going to show you an easy way to access the center diff. A lot of people have complained saying it is really difficult. You got to remove a whole lot of stuff from the rear end. You got to basically disassemble the whole rear end to get to the center diff. And I'm going to tell you right now that is not true. It is actually fairly easy. I will admit there are a lot of screws that you are going to have to remove, but again, it is still easy. And as you can see, I've already done a couple of things just to prep for it. Now you can do this with the motor installed or with the motor removed. I will remove the motor and then I will get to what will need to be done. So let me get that motor out and then I'll be right back. Okay, so got the motor removed. As you'll also notice, the receiver has been removed from the receiver box. So, first step is going to be to remove the servo, and that involves 4 screws here, plus you're going to want to disconnect either the servo end or the servo saver end. Either one of those will work equally well. In my case, I'm going to remove the servo saver end. So let me get the servo out. Okay, so servo is out, and you might have noticed that I put the screws back in just a little bit. So for those who might know or have followed me before, yes, you can just set your screws off to the side and line them in an organized way. I mean, I did that over here on the side with the 2 motor mount screws. But what I usually like to do is to put the screws back into, basically give them a holding spot so that I know exactly which screws go where. So, next thing is going to be to remove the center brace, of which you've got a screw and a nut here, and you've got 2 screws here on this side. So let me get those removed. There. So we've got the whole center brace and the center brace holder, that plus, this piece here, I'm going to call that the center brace holder. I don't even know what it's actually called. I could look it up, but it doesn't matter. Might have noticed that I was using a pair of needle nose pliers to hold the nut. If you remove the battery tray, which obviously takes 2 more screws to be removed, then you can use a nut driver to hold that nut. But not wanting to remove the battery tray, not needing to remove it, I just felt it was much easier just to use a pair of needle nose pliers to hold the nut in place while I removed the screw. Got everything moved out of the way. So next up is to remove these 4 screws here. That is for the center diff bearing holder. Those of you who maybe you own an ARMA Infraction, Limitless, Felony, granted it's more in the center, but the design is virtually identical to those vehicles. As a matter of fact, when I get to the center diff, you'll notice that there's an outdrive cup on each end. And as some of you also know, you can replace the center diff with a center spool. Again, very reminiscent of those ARMA vehicles. So let's get these 4 screws out and we'll get that cover removed. And as you can see, the center diff bearing cover is, again, very reminiscent of the design used by ARMA for theirs. The only real difference is that this is a 1-piece, whereas theirs is a 3-piece, because the bearing holders are actually held to the cover, sorry about that, by a separate screw. These, it's just one molded piece. Actually makes it easier to remove. So, there you got it. The center diff is fully exposed. Now, at this point, we get to the trick. Now, something I'm going to point out is, as a lot of people know, only the SBK10 carbon version has a 2-piece center drive shaft, and there are bearings as well as the center bearing holder. So that is 2 additional screws that will have to be removed. Point those out when I flip it over. As for the Omni Terminator, the metal version of the SBK, as well as both versions of the, I should say all 4 versions of the XTS, because you got the F10 metal, F10 carbon, S10 metal, S10 carbon. All of those other vehicles use a 1-piece, so you won't be dealing with this. So let's get this flipped over and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So on the bottom, you can see these 2 screws here, this top one and this bottom one, at least from this angle. Those are the 2 screws that hold the center drive shaft bearing holder. Additionally, you're going to have this screw, and this screw to remove. Those are the 3 screws that hold the motor plate. So let's get those removed, and then I will show you the actual trick. Okay, so we got those 5 screws removed, and something I should have pointed out, but I'll point it out now, is that some of you may know that Rlaarlo, and sometimes even other companies, are known to use an excessive amount of thread locker. So you may need to apply heat to those 3 screws to break down the thread locker before you remove them. These 2 screws, obviously going into plastic, don't need that. Now, you notice my hand position is a little strange, and that's because I was using 2 fingers to hold the center bearing carrier and the motor plate in place, because I did not want those to fall out. Otherwise, everything would be falling out and I wouldn't be able to show you exactly what I'm trying to show you. With that, we have the motor plate here. The trick that I'm talking about is that you can rotate the motor mount, the motor plate, whatever you want to call it, motor plate, bearing, carrier plate. You can rotate this like that. Now, if you see, if this is how it's mounted in the vehicle, you rotate it like that, right off the front bearing of the center diff, and it just comes out. And at that point, you just have to lift up, and the center diff comes right out. Very easy. Now, yes, it does require removing a good number of screws. Real quick, so 4, 5, 6, 8, 12 screws. Now, technically, you don't need to remove the gear cover from the center bearing cover. You can actually leave that attached. You can literally just undo the 4 screws once you have the center brace removed and just pull that whole thing off with that already attached. The only reason it's attached, or the only reason it's removed, is because I actually removed it and removed the motor ahead of time. And again, you don't need to remove the motor. You can do this whole thing with the motor in place, but it's your choice. As for getting the diff back in, once you rebuild the diff, or if you're going to change the spur gear, currently it is the 48P. They do have the optional 32P, which again, there's a debate on whether it is truly 32P or whether it is actually mod 0.6. Consensus does seem to be that it is mod 0.6, but I'll get into that more when I get to my project that I'm working on. It is based on the SBK10. That's all I'll say. Some of you may have seen some photos or stuff that I've hinted at things, but I'll get that done pretty soon. The other option, obviously, again, is those who want to replace the center diff with the center spool. So whatever it is, once you get it, you're going to need to position it down into the bearing carrier. You're probably gonna have to rotate it a little bit until you get it situated. There it goes. Now it catches the end of the part coming out of the rear diff. Then again, just lift. It's probably easy to rotate so that you have this side to side. If you have it up and down, it could be a little more difficult to get in. So you just rotate that back in. You've got that part just like that. As for the bearing carrier motor mount plate, slide it into the bearing and then rotate back into its normal position, and you are good to go. I would recommend holding them down 1 finger each, flip it over, And then you only need to get one screw in to start. What I would recommend if you're going to do for the motor plate first is do the center one. You definitely want to do either the center one or this one just in alignment, but it's easier just to start with the center one. It's more centralized for the entire motor mount bearing carrier plate, whatever. Sorry, I'm tired of saying 27 words when 2 words could probably be used. Do the same thing on the front bearing holder if you happen to have the carbon fiber version of the SBK. Again, this does not apply to any of the Omni Terminator platform-based vehicles. And as usual, I will tighten it until it's just tight and then back off a little bit. If there was any softening of the plastic due to friction, then that will give it time to harden. Now, as you can see, when I'm doing the Loctite, I'm just putting a tiny drop on. You really don't need much. I mean, you probably, well, it's not going to focus, so sorry about that, but I mean, there is such a minimal amount on there, it's only enough to hold it. Don't need to douse it. Don't need to use red Loctite. If you want, there's a company called Permatex, which does make an orange thread locker. Orange is outstanding. What it does is it provides a holding strength that is almost equal to red, but in terms of removing it, it has a release strength that is only slightly higher than blue. Huge advantage over red thread locker. As a matter of fact, you can see right here, Permatex orange thread locker. I use this whenever I, really want or sort of kind of need to use red, but it's not something that I know is going to be, permanent. Basically, I try to use red only when it's something that I will either never have to remove or something that I'm hoping I will never have to remove. If I need that holding strength, but it's anything that might get removed, then I will use the orange. For everything else, definitely use the blue. If you're worried about it loosening up because of oil, they do make 2 different variants of the blue. One is not oil resistant, and if there's any sort of oil, any residue on the screw or other metal parts, it will break free on its own. If you use the one that is designed for use with oil, then that one will continue to hold. So that's probably been enough time for these two. And just do like a 1/4 turn to back off and then tighten it. And then the same thing with this one, about a 1/4 turn, maybe an 1/8 of a turn back off and then tighten it. And that is good to go. I'm not going to cover step by step right here in the video, but from this point, all you need to do is reinstall the bearing cover, 4 screws there. 5 if you did remove the gear cover, then reinstall the center brace, 3 screws there, then reinstall the servo, 4 + 1, 5 screws there, and at that point you are done. This definitely shows you how easy it is to remove and reinstall, or I shouldn't say remove, how easy it is to gain access to and remove the center diff. So I'm gonna get most of it back together off camera and be right back. Okay, so it is back together. Now, a couple of things to note. Obviously, I still need to put the heatsink fan back on. I'm thinking about zip tying this over here. Didn't really like the way I had it before. I did do 3 changes off camera. One of which was I took off the 27 tooth and here's the 27 tooth. And I put the 24 tooth back on. I did do 2 other changes, but I'm not going to say what they are. Put in the comments if you can figure out what the other 2 changes are. And when I do the next video, I will mention what the changes actually were. And if anyone gets it correct, then I'll give a shout out to those who got it correct, or I'll put your name on the screen or something. But no, primarily, as you can see, accessing a center diff is really not that difficult, despite what some people have said. It's just, it does take removal of a good number of screws. As I said, it's actually very easily done. So for those who are claiming that it is very difficult to access and or change the spur gear, no, it is not. It is very easy. I've shown you how it's done. You can see it didn't take much time. That's it. Until next time, mahalo.